Welcome everyone to MaleFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Unreal Season 1 Episode 10. It is the season finale and it is called Future. So spoilers for the episode, and this is a Patreon sponsored review, so thank you very much to Board Now for picking the show. So yeah, it's been quite a journey over the 10 episodes. We left episode 9 in a bit of a cliffhanger with Adam asking Rachel to run away with him. And I think my first thought in this episode was how quickly that was shot away. Right, it was like, obviously I expected it not to happen, but I thought like the decision would be made by the end of the episode not to run away. Instead, it happens by the title screen. Basically Quinn catches Adam leaving and clearly says something to him. We find out a bit later a little bit more context of what she actually said, but despite the fact that Rachel has left a note for Jeremy saying that she doesn't deserve him, luckily she didn't get too specific. Now admittedly, he finds out later anyway. He actually does a bit of detective work and tricks Adam into admitting by saying, hey, Rachel told me what happened, and Adam kind of gives enough details that he's able to get a sense of what was going on, that she was about to run away with another guy, so on, and that leads to some big things. But yeah, like, so this is actually just the setup of the episode, is the fallout or the decision to not actually go through with it. And interestingly, it's Adam who is manipulated into making that choice rather than Rachel deciding not to go, which kind of sends Rachel on a bit of a warpath after she's upset, where she wants to get some modicum of revenge and kind of pitches it to Quinn as a way to give them a big finale. Although it does ruin the potential spin-off, but neither of them seem to really care at this point, given everything that's going on with their love lives, pretty much. And also the fact that Brad, the executive, is basically deciding not to return Quinn's calls and accept future pitches. So her whole like potential path to being successful on her own away from Chet seems to have been cut off as well. And that kind of like creates this perfect storm where both of them are a little bit scorned and ready to go scorched earth on the people around them. And all in the name of, as well, of making a good TV show. At least what they think is a good TV show. So there's a lot of complicated moving parts here emotionally, which is definitely the best thing about this show, typically, is kind of reading the motivations and why characters are doing things and getting to the root of what they actually feel. Because early on in the episode, I definitely felt like Quinn had manipulated Rachel here. Because when Rachel comes in and wants to like make a great finale, and then Quinn kind of starts opening up about how she feels about Chet, it almost felt like Quinn had like done a bit of a domino effect to give herself her kind of best friend back to like, so in a weird way it was kind of nice seeing them both just open up and talk about how they feel. It felt like they were both being honest about things they've been through recently, but there was kind of a shadow or a cloud over it because it's only happening because Quinn sort of went behind Rachel's back and created this situation by making Adam turn his back on her. So I was really like thinking about it during this scene of like how nice it felt that they were able to open up. It was like these two friends finally like reconnecting in some way, and I think by the end of the episode that is actually true. Like I think that the final beat for these two characters at the end of the episode is Rachel saying I love you, even after knowing what Quinn has done and kind of giving her shit for it, and Quinn says I love you back. And it's oddly kind of sweet that this was ultimately about this friendship between two women instead of like the romantic relationships that they were kind of focusing on for a lot of the season. I think that's very much the point of the show in some ways, and the point of this season has been to kind of have that at the center. And it's not some clean, because I think sometimes when you have a show or a movie and it wants to do like a positive female friendship, right? And it's something that a lot of movies and shows for a long time neglected, right? Is the women characters. It's the whole point of the Bechdel test and all the rest of it is that the idea that you have a story and you have what am I trying to say here? I was about to explain what the Bechdel test was. I don't want to do that. Right? I feel like you probably know what that is, and if you don't, Google it. Right? But I think even shows that make a good effort of having good female friendships, they're often very positive, and that's not necessarily like a critique I'm making, but almost to counteract the fact that it's something that's usually ignored. The kind of the counteraction to that is that when a creator or a writer gets a chance to put in a female friendship, it tends to be very strong and empowering and very positive, and therefore isn't always necessarily as complex and has the faults that a real relationship or friendship does. And I'm not saying that they're all like that. I'm saying that, but a lot of the time, there'll be kind of like a sort of really positive girl power kind of message to it. I think what's interesting about the friendship between Quinn and Rachel is that it's messy, it's complicated. Sometimes one of them is kind of being a villain, but, you know, they forgive each other and they get over it. There's layers to it. There's a lot more going on there that I think feels like an evolution of just having, you know, a good female friendship between two women. It feels like it's the next stage of that, where it's a bit more, you know, like, it's not all good. There's bad parts to it. Like, there's mistakes that are made. There's parts where one does something wrong or both do something wrong. There's a lot more going on there. So I think that's the strongest element of this finale for sure. Because I will say it was a bit of a whiplash at the start, how quickly we kind of like got rid of that potential cliffhanger. Like, we threw it away by the opening title. And I don't even know if disappointment's the right word. I just felt like, whoa, that was quick. It wasn't so much that I was excited about her running away, because I didn't expect it to actually happen, but it's just the way it got rid of it so quickly really threw me for a loop. But then you get into what the episode actually does and what it's doing. And we get some more of that manipulation that the show is very good at, where you're not really sure what the plan is yet. You know Rachel and Quinn are up to something, and you're kind of questioning conversations Rachel's having with Adam or with the girls, and what they're trying to skew. Now, I think you kind of get the vibe, because there's a revenge element here, that it's probably to ruin the potential wedding that's going to happen by the end of the show. And that does, of course, what happens, but you're not really sure exactly how they're manipulating it throughout, and which parts are being designed to create this, right? The highlight, of course, is the big confessional scene where Rachel, once they're in England for the wedding, which by the way, I was chuckling a little bit, because obviously it's a TV show, so they're just pretending that they've went to London, and they're shooting in the UK, and they've got like one sort of like kind of castle-y looking building that they're using as the kind of the place where Adam's family lives, and that's fine. But when they cut to the just the general kind of like, hey, here's a shot of Parliament. It just really made me laugh. Like, I'm not saying it is stock footage, but it felt like a stock footage shot before it just went, okay, and here's the real stuff we did with the actors, where we're clearly just in somewhere else in California, but we're tinting the color a little bit to make it feel a little bit more dreary. Even though it's the summer and it's actually quite a sunny day still, but whatever. I got a chuckle out of that. I think it especially stuck out to me just because I happen to live in the UK, and like there was an air of like fakeness to it that got me a little bit amused. But they're in this church, the wedding's being prepped, and Rachel pulls him into the confession booth and puts on the waterworks and starts begging to know what changed and why he dumped her. And he just kind of like, you know, says, oh, he can't be dealing with this, and leaves. But she properly cries. And honestly, I think anyone who's been watching this show should be able to predict that this is an act, that she is putting this on. And sure enough, the second he leaves that booth, her face just like straightens up and she wipes the tear. And it's like, clearly that's all it was. And then the reveal that Anna was sitting on the other side of the confessional and heard the entire thing about what was about to happen, about running away, all the things, because earlier on in the episode, when she was worried that Adam might pick Grace still because he's tempted for the sexy one. Grace makes a pitch to him why he should pick her again still, and she just tells Grace, "Hey, I had sex with Adam. He's a slut. You shouldn't pick him." But it doesn't seem to bother Grace that much. Grace is just kind of willing to accept that he's a bit of a man whore and wants to just pursue her career and have the year of success and whatever. But this is the play to convince Anna to not go through with things. So they get the live TV thing. This is also all set up to make Chet look bad. Quinn even says, "Hey, Chet, you direct it. You're the hotshot. You're in charge." and makes him look really bad in front of Brad when everything starts falling apart because the bride doesn't show up, and he's trying to give camera directions and it's all falling apart because he doesn't know how to do it. He doesn't know how to call shots. Basically, Brad has to beg Quinn to take control and fix it, which she does, and maybe gets a little bit of power back in the process. We don't really get to see the fallout of this yet, but presumably that'll be something that we get to see a little bit of the effect of in season 2. Yeah, it's. I mean, I think the core relationships though that are kind of feeding out of these things, which are Jeremy and Rachel, and then Quinn and Chet, are kind of interesting because they're both kind of done by the end of this episode. Although Jeremy, like, you know, the end of the episode is Jeremy going to Rachel's mum to say, hey, I think she's got some problems. I think she needs some psychiatric help again, which did feel a bit malicious. Like, I think the audience can get behind them in the middle of the episode because he basically finds out what happened to some extent with Adam, and he chooses to embarrass Rachel right after the big proposal happens for the TV show. He makes it look like he's about to propose to Rachel. He gets down on one knee, he sort of announces to everyone, talks about how their feelings and the relationship and all the rest of it. He gets down on one knee and then says, how much of an idiot do you think I am? And then announces to everyone that he's doing this in front of everyone to make sure that they never let him be tricked by her again. And, you know, really goes out of his way to make a big scene about it. And I think what's interesting about this is, one, I don't think he's like, well, it's a bit of like he's been a bit vindictive here. I don't think it's entirely unearned on Rachel's part, right? I think she has kind of earned a bit of this. Maybe not this exact thing, but I don't think you can hate him for wanting to make a big song and dance about getting back at her and like making it clear that he knows who she is and that he's pissed. I think you can get on board with that. I think what's interesting though is part of what he says here is that, oh, like I always used to say that this show made you a bad person and it got into your head and it made you do bad things, but I was wrong. You're the poison. You're the bad person. Blah blah blah. You know, he sort of like unleashes his feelings and says she's awful. But what I think is interesting is that him kind of keeping this a secret and then launching it onto her in this way, this very public way, is not actually all that different from her like plotting her revenge against Adam and making him get embarrassed on TV with the bride no showing. And then she proudly, of course, goes up during that scene and announces to the audience that Adam's a slut and he's been dumped at the altar. So this is a first. The Bachelor's going home alone. And then she says the line that the presenter always says to the girls when they get eliminated, you know, Adam, you're free to go, I think is the line. If it's not that, it's some whatever he always says when one of the girls gets eliminated. And it really feels like, oh, like she's enjoying this. But I think it's interesting that Jeremy kind of, while it wasn't as intricate and it wasn't as hard to pull off, it definitely feels like he's like learned from Rachel. Or at the very least, he's more like her than maybe he would like to admit. By holding this to himself and making a big like show and presentation of it. Or arguably, I suppose you could say that he's only doing it the way she would do it to make a point. Like he's intentionally doing a Rachel thing. I think what muddies it up though is that ending where he goes to the mum, as if he's trying to like ruin her life now. Like he's not just satisfied with embarrassing her and making his big like sort of like FU speech. That he's kind of justified to a point of doing some of that. Maybe not the public part of it, but certainly like expressing his feelings, saying it's over. Yeah, like he is well within his rights to make all these things clear and felt. Going to her mother to try and like mess with her life though, knowing that her mother's like this like meddling psychologist, you know, from the hints we've had before, back when we met her before. I think that's where it's like, okay, you're crossing over into slight villain territory here, and I'm not really sure, you know, where we're going with that necessarily. So I'm very curious to see what they do with that in future episodes. But yeah, I think that side of things is solid in the sense that it kind of feeds into the themes of the episode with the idea of getting the revenge. And ultimately, like Quinn, like, because I don't think it's an accident that, you know, not only do we have these interactions with Quinn and Rachel early on, but once this happens, because Rachel was sharing a hotel room with Jeremy, she ends up sleeping in the same bed with Quinn, and they wake up together, and it's like an awkward like couple waking up. And it's funny, you know, Quinn saying, "Oh, don't look at me first thing in the morning." Like it's very entertaining. But again, I don't think it's an accident that we see them kind of in this, like, you know, not domestic, but like, you know, like being there for each other in whatever weird ways their relationship works. And then there's a big scene at the end when, you know, Rachel's found out from Adam to some extent that Quinn intervened and said a bunch of things about her to make him change his mind. When she asked Quinn about it, Quinn's like, "What, you want to blame me? You've made enough of your own mistakes. It's a gift. I kept you from, like, you know, ruining things." I think my favorite thing about that scene, though, on the deck chairs at the end, when they're having this sort of final heart-to-heart that ends with them saying "I love you" to each other, is that they bring up Mary. And I really like this. I really like that, like, halfway through this scene, Rachel just says, "Did we kill someone?" And Quinn admits that yes, we did. Let's not do that again. I kind of like it because it really felt like they were laying bare in this scene. Was like, hey, here's the things we've went through. We've basically discovered a lot of our mistakes this season, and we've done a lot of things, but that was actually over a line, and it's not something we're happy that happened. Right? You know, we manipulate people, we do these things. But that was a very bad thing that happened, and we don't want to do that again. Like, I love the way it just comes out, and I love the admission, because so much of, like, when that happened, when Mary jumped off the roof, and all of the following episode was all about Quinn doing damage control and not accepting responsibility as best she could, so the show wouldn't have to accept responsibility. And there was a lot of power here, I think, in Rachel just saying, "Did we do that?" and Quinn admitting, "Yes, we did." Like, Quinn knows that's their fault. Quinn knows that they did this to that woman. And they're willing to go on. They're willing to do more. And, you know, they're basically just talking about, you know, next season now. There's some jokes about pitching some new shows and spin-offs and whatnot, but ultimately it sounds like they're content doing another year. So, no, I think that scene was really good. The stuff with Quinn and Chet is maybe not as explosive, of course. It basically all just boils down to Quinn, you know, making clear that it's over. There's a whole scene early on where they have the therapist lady on the show who wants more screen time with Madison, and they're like, "Hey, Madison doesn't want to sue anyone," the whole thing. And what's so funny is that much like Quinn and Rachel forgiving each other at the end of the episode and not letting anything sort of like hold their relationship down, it's kind of interesting how Chet is willing to just move past the fact that Quinn was going to tell Madison to, like, sue him for assault, and he is willing to forgive that, and he expects her to forgive him for what happened with Madison. That he's always going to do this. He's always going to sleep around. That's who he is, and you know that. But Quinn's not really willing to accept the fact that now she's the wife that's being cheated on, and you know that you know. So I don't think necessarily it means that they'll never sleep together again. I feel like Quinn might do that, but I don't think Quinn is interested in pretending that this was ever going to be love. Like, she feels very disillusioned about the notion. She says something to the effect of, "Oh, I was starting to actually buy into the crap we sell here. The idea of love, the idea that any of it means anything, or can be, your life can be built around it, or whatever." So I like, yeah. And even the conversation she has with Rachel, they talk about pitching a show which is basically everlasting. They call it everlasting with all the benefits. Was that what they called it? But it was the idea that they would work in the idea that the contestants would also be trying to get a job. It'd be mixing the career side of and Rachel just sort of like says, "Our audience does not care about women having jobs." And it's kind of this, like, again, this discussion, and you know, that feeds back into like the entire character, or both of them really, but Quinn especially. She, a whole season, has been trying to be respected professionally. She wants to advance professionally, and you know, the men just aren't interested. They aren't interested in her being the one who's pitching the ideas or going up the ladder. And you know, that cynicism is obviously warranted for many reasons, but it's also, you're kind of hoping that, oh, maybe you can fight through it if you try hard enough, and maybe don't give up. Not that it feels that these characters are giving up. If anything, one of the things that makes them stick out in this show is just how much fight they've got in them. Sometimes to a fault, arguably, but like it feels like they're going to keep trying, but they're going to keep making mistakes. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm very curious actually. Like I think Chet and Jeremy are probably both around next season, and I'm not really sure where. Like Jeremy, I can kind of get a sense. Okay, he clearly is still going to be obsessed with Rachel, maybe not wanting to get back together with her, but clearly he's going to be holding a grudge, and he's doing whatever else. I'm not sure where Chet and Quinn's relationship goes next season. I'm not sure. I expect him to still be around, but I think what I will say about this finale is that it does make it feel like they had a key set of themes in mind for what the whole season was trying to do. Like this idea that everything is kind of funneled back into this core relationship between Quinn and Rachel, and these conversations about their careers and their love lives and the mistakes they make in their love lives feels like it's been the central themes for the entire thing. And the finale does feel like it's kind of wrapped a bow on a central idea that they were going for, which makes me kind of excited because as well I still think these are going to be factors next season, and they're still going to be, like, some of them might still be a big part of it. I do wonder what new maybe theme they introduce, something, what's season 2 specifically about, and what's season 2's goal by the end of the season. I'm kind of excited to see what the new focus might be, or what the backbone might be. I didn't even mention they brought back the mean girl from like episode 1, which I'm glad they specified who that was, because I was never going to remember from episode 1, especially since I've been watching them monthly. There was no chance I was going to remember her face when she was gone after episode 1. And I was wondering, like, okay, why is she here other than to make Chet look bad because it was Chet's idea? But I will say, during the scene where Jeremy's embarrassing Rachel and dumping her, I did think that her reactions and like yelling, eat it, bitch, or whatever she says to her, was quite funny. Like her relishing was quite amusing. Another funny sequence is when the three ladies, so it's like Grace, Anna, and then the bitch from episode 1 are like the contestants again, and they're like meeting Adam's grandmother, who's like a duchess. And she's got a lot of like funny, like she's like this old, like she's speaking very proper, very English, but she's talking about like snorting cocaine off of Mick Jagger's cock. And then she comes in and they're all nervous and acting all proper for her. And then the first thing she says is, "Okay, which of you ladies has slept with my grandson?" And like we don't get to see the rest of the scene. I almost wish we did, because I feel like her asking inappropriate questions, and even her advice to Adam's very much like, one, it's racist because she says don't pick the quote-unquote brown girl, but also, just start making babies, and like, I'm sure you had fun with the others, but like, pick the innocent pretty one, meaning Anna. So like that stuff was amusing. Like the idea that like Adam's grandmother is just as cold and cynical as arguably Quinn is in a lot of ways, but just from a very different perspective and from a very different place in the world. But she has that kind of same attitude where she's like, "Oh no, that one's just a trollop, that one's just a slut. You pick this one because that's what's best for the family." Like, she talks about Adam's marriage and benefiting the family the same way that Quinn talks about anything happening on the show benefiting the show and the ratings. Like, it's a very similar attitude, which I don't think is an accident. I think this idea of like, hey, she found a way to gain power, this Duchess, and she did it like her way. I think there's definitely a through line about how like different ways people have found power in this show. So it's interesting. And I think the show's got a lot to say still. So even when some things feel like it takes a little bit of a weird turn, or like we get kind of like, arguably a kind of a cheap cliffhanger last episode that's wrapped up very quickly this episode, everything else it does throughout the rest of the episode feels like it's still saying something. So it never feels like, even if it does something that feels a little hokey from like a structure point of view, it always feels like it has something clear in mind that it wants to talk about. So it never feels like you're just wasting time. It never feels like you pivoted away from an idea just because the writers got bored. No, it's because they had a clear thought about where they wanted to go with their core themes and where they wanted the characters to be by the end of the story. And even more so true in the finale, because it is the end of this season's through line and arc. So yeah, it was good. It was a good finale. I think it was a good finale, and in the sense that it was also a surprising finale in some ways. Like the way it wrapped up with the two lead characters, I think was not how I expected, but very satisfying, which is a great combination. When you can give me something a little unexpected, but after I watch it, I go, oh no, it should have always ended that way. They were right. That's perfect. That's the perfect mix. It's the perfect mix because the writers knew better than I did, and they nailed it. So good stuff. Also, there's a moment when Anna's like leaving the place when they catch her with the camera, and she's walking up this big long staircase, and the cameras are waiting at the top of the hill, and she has this little moment where she realizes, oh, this is still part of the show. They want me to give a speech, and she does. She gives a big speech about how Adam's not the one for her, and she gets into it and sort of like, okay, this is still kind of shitty, but I'm going to take control of the moment and say what I want to say, and she does. So yeah, I think, you know, if nothing else, like sometimes this show feels like it's about how you're dealt like kind of like a shady hand sometimes that doesn't feel great, but you can still make the best of it and use it to benefit you, even when the hand that's been dealt is like been dealt in a way to your disadvantage, because everything's unfair. Maybe you can still milk something out of it. I think that's also part of the show for sure. So there's my thoughts on the UnReal Season 1 finale. I look forward to start Season 2, assuming that Board Now is going to want me to continue with UnReal, but that is what I expect at the moment. That is up to him. But thank you very much for joining me for these reviews. Hopefully some people have discovered the show maybe, because it is pretty good. it's a surprising find. So like, subscribe, all the usual stuff, helps out a bunch if you do. And of course you can support all the content over at Patreon, patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, and help keep everything coming. But that is me, so thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?